Hey everyone, Pokémon Scarlet Violet came out 2.5 years ago, and despite becoming the second best-selling Pokémon games of all time, there's been a consistent blotch on its legacy ever since launch: its performance. While the game has had numerous patches which, alongside adding new content, have fixed a variety of bugs, the performance issues have never really been resolved. Until now. Pokémon Scarlet Violet is getting a special update for the new Nintendo console, the Nintendo Switch 2, and this update is 100% free for all players on the Nintendo Switch 2. The Pokémon Company International was kind enough to invite us to their headquarters to give us an exclusive hands-on for this update. We were given 75 minutes to explore the game however we saw fit, and then ended with a Terra Raid battle. Going in, I had a list of areas to check out which are known to have issues on the base Nintendo Switch: Artisan, Tagtree Thicket and Kazuroya Lake, among others. And I made sure that they were my first port of call to see if they'd been fixed, and honestly, I was incredibly surprised. That's right, even the windmill in Artisan has been fixed to a standard frame rate. Do note, Pokémon Scarlet and Violet on Nintendo Switch 2 do support high dynamic range, HDR, but due to our capture device we had to turn it off to make sure we could capture in the highest resolution and frame rate possible. The visuals themselves have a bit of improvement. The colours are more vibrant even without HDR, and the light bounces off the water better, and the Pokémon models have never looked better. In battle with the animations, the particles are just great and really pop, and this is further shown off when you can terrestrialise a Pokémon, either in standard battle or as part of a Terra Raid battle. That said, the texture work hasn't really improved for the overworld of Paldea, so you can see more repeating textures on cliffs in the distance. And with the increased visual fidelity, it does make them a bit more clearer, which may mean you may notice the repeating a bit more. As mentioned, the Artisan windmill, which rendered at a lower frame rate on the Nintendo Switch, now runs at a stable, fast frame rate, but that isn't all. Most distant objects, people and Pokémon do as well. On the Nintendo Switch, there was another trick where the Pokémon models would be at a lower polygon density if they are at a distance, but that doesn't seem to be the case here as well. Pokémon far away seem to have a standard size, and encountering small Pokémon such as Tandemaus with the camera zoomed far away also had it appear as normal. This is a great fix, as sometimes those Pokémon in the lower polygonal models could seem a bit jarring compared to the other high quality ones on the Nintendo Switch. That's not to say that the visuals are perfect, however. There's still an element of pop-in of some textures as you're going through the region, especially if you're rushing through on Koraidon and Miraidon. This also unfortunately applies to the human characters that adorn the various towns, where they might not spawn in until you're much closer, and even closer if you're rushing through. It's still a bit jarring to see here and there, but really that is one of the only blemishes on this patch. Now we're at the big area, the bit that most people are most intrigued to see: the frame rates. On the Nintendo Switch, Pokémon Scarlet and Violet targeted at 30 frames per second, but often sat between 20 and 25 depending on what was going on the screen in the overworld, sometimes dropping as low as 15. On the Nintendo Switch 2, however, the frame rate has been pushed up to 60 frames per second. This includes all areas, including Kazuroya Lake, one of the most problematic areas on the Nintendo Switch. This time I was able to jump off a cliff overlooking the lake, land in the water and rush through past dozens of Pokémon, all in the rain, and the frame was steady at 60 frames per second. It was such a wild thing to see, everything ran so smooth, even in the transitions from the overworld to the battle. The battles also stay at 60 frames per second, so you can see all the Pokémon move animations in the new fidelity. Even during a full Terra Raid battle with friends, it remained at a steady 60 frames per second, which is just fantastic. That said, it's not a locked frame rate, unfortunately, but the vast majority of the time it stayed at 60 frames per second, with the occasional drop in the more troublesome areas down to 55 frames per second. I primarily noticed this in Kitsukami and the Blueberry Academy, more specifically around the coastal biome and the savanna biome, when there's a lot more happening with the foliage, but even then this is something I only found because I was looking for it in my footage. Technical rundown aside, the new frame rate made the game feel so smooth. Compared to how it was before, which I personally didn't have a problem with, it is now on a whole different level. Just running through the region just feels so slick and so smooth, regardless of whether you're walking, running, riding on Koraidon or Miraidon, or gliding. And the battles feel great, and the new particles and the vibrant colours just make everything look fantastic. The resolution has also been improved. We only played on the TV mode and it output in 4K, but like the games and contemporaries on the Nintendo Switch 2, it's not rendering at 4K but has a resolution between 1080p and 2160p, but it has some aliasing to help smooth things down. This has given the game an extra bit of clarity, where in the past you'd see some distant textures look a bit jagged. Here they're not much more visible and much more smooth. Unfortunately, I was unable to test how the game runs in handheld mode, so I'll need to wait until launch to see how that runs. There are far more changes than just the resolution and frame rate, however. The most notable of which is the amount of Pokémon that can spawn at any one time. Previously on the Nintendo Switch, it was typically locked at around 15 Pokémon spawning at any time. However, with this update, the spawn radius has been increased massively, and at one point we counted over 30 Pokemon spawning at once. This increased spawn radius has made the world of Paldea feel more alive. And this is not just because you're going to see more varied spawns at any time, but because due to the distance, you can see the ecology of Pokemon more. On the Nintendo Switch, you could see some of these examples of Pokemon interacting with the overworld from time to time, but due to how small the spawn radius was, they'd react to you quicker so you wouldn't see it as much. On the Nintendo Switch 2, however, with the increased spawn radius, you could see these small examples far more. While moving through Kitakami, I saw a Poochyena just casually sleeping in the grove and didn't get disturbed. I saw lots of Pokemon just running around and it was just fantastic, and this sort of stuff did exist on the Nintendo Switch, but I saw far more of it in just this 1 hour of playtime, and on a personal level this is going to give me so much joy to see how the Pokemon are spawning in general. That said, there is a little bit of concern for shiny hunts, as this increased radius means you'll get more Pokemon that aren't necessarily the ones you're looking for to spawn. This is a minor concern in the grand scheme of things, and seeing the world with wild Pokemon more than before is just a fantastic thing to see in general. Next are the load times. As with all Pokemon games since Pokemon Red and Blue, you have the ability to fly between various key areas in the region. With the Nintendo Switch 2 patch, this is sped up incredibly. When you fly between certain points in the same regions, in our test it would take around 8 seconds on the original Nintendo Switch, whereas here it took less than 2 seconds. This gets even more noticeable when you fly between Paldea and Kitakami or the Blueberry Academy. On the Nintendo Switch this took up to and over 20 seconds, but in our test on the Nintendo Switch 2, this took just 3 seconds, which is a massive improvement. Mileage of this, of course, will vary based on the SD card you use, whether you put the game on internal memory or if it's on cartridge, but regardless, our test showed some great improvement. Another of the improvements is the box system. Previously on the Nintendo Switch, this took a while for all the icons to load when you first boot up the boxes after loading the game. However, this issue is gone on the Nintendo Switch 2 and the boxes are quick and instant in loading. A similar fix comes from changing your outfit. This had a bit of lag originally as soon as you press the button to open the menu, but this has been sped up considerably on the Nintendo Switch 2. Overall, from the time I spent with this patch, I'm incredibly impressed. I personally didn't have many issues with the game on the base Switch originally, but now, going back, I just can't play it. I am struggling. The 60 frames per second frame rate and the Ultra HD visuals have really propelled the game up. It's such a smooth and pleasant experience that almost feels too good to be true. I just wanted to keep going from place to place throughout Paldea, Kitakami and the Blueberry Academy just to see the game in this new light. Although I've only had an hour and a half with this update, it really makes me think that this is how the game should have been the whole time. It has elevated the game, and while it's still not perfect, it's such a joy to play through, and I'm really looking forward to jumping back in when the Nintendo Switch 2 releases. I can't overstate how much better the game is with this, and it has really given me hope for the future with Pokémon Legend ZA and future Pokémon generations on the Nintendo Switch 2. If they can run like this, then we are in for a good time for many years. If you haven't played Pokémon Scarlet or Pokémon Violet yet, then now is definitely the time to jump in. If you never finished the DLC before, then now is the time to jump in. This needs to be played to be believed. And thank you all very much for watching this video. Let me know what your thoughts are on the Nintendo Switch 2 patch, if you're getting it, and be sure to like, comment and subscribe for more Cerebi videos. And until next time, see ya!